Greetings programs, welcome back to the Game Grid. You're back with Gaming Magic Mark. It's Baldur's Gate 3, and in this short video what I wanted to do was give you some ideas of ways of composing your party and making sure that your party is built in such a way that it can survive tricky encounters, especially if you decide to play like I do on Tactician Mode. Every encounter is challenging, but it is not going to overcome you. You know that if you build your party in a certain way, with certain roles taken care of, and then also overlapping roles as well, that means that your party is going to be able to prevail in the long run. I'm going to give you some ideas in just a few minutes, hopefully, and the setting that I'm going to use is a fight that I encountered a little while ago. It's in the second act. It's in the Gauntlet of Shah part of the second act, and it's specifically an encounter that turned into combat for my playthrough with a character called Balthazar. Okay, there he is on the ground there. Now it looks, if you look at the side of my screen here, it looks like I'm in a bad way. I'm in a lot of trouble. The reality is very far from that. Okay, I'm going to prove that to you. So it looks like I've got a couple of ghouls there and a flesh golem, and then my party is split up in this wider area, and two of the party members are close to death. One party member is still okay, that's Shadowheart, and Karlach is hanging in there, just about. The reality is that within about 10 turns from this point, I actually go on and win it quite easily, and really I had just, met the pivotal point in the combat by dealing with Balthazar. Like I said, I don't want to give too many spoilers. I'm not going to tell you how I got here, what led up to it, or anything like that. I'm also going to say there's, probably no need for you to have combat with Balthazar, but if it turns to that, then your party composition is going to have a big role to play in how much of a way that you can survive. And so if I show you my party here, and we're just ignoring the fact that my backpacks are a mess, and there's, not everyone has health potions and things like that, which I absolutely would have gone into the combat with. Also, some of my characters might not be absolutely optimally set up from an equipment point of view. It's because I've been respecking several and trying things out at this point, and at that point I also just wanted to try it out on that battle, which I really enjoy. You can see that my party is made up of the heavy hitter that is Karlach, and she's in as a barbarian, and that's obviously no sort of surprises there. And she loves to engage in her frenzy, so she's gonna smash heads, and I love that role. I love the fact that she throws things. I got a whole bunch of halberds that I can throw alongside other things that I can throw as well. That's awesome. The next thing to say is that Will and my Layla of the Glade character here, who is primarily a bard of the College of Lore, as per my other video that I did recently. Will is a Sorlock. He's a sorcerer and a warlock, and I spec him as that. And then Layla is a pure College of Lore bard. They're all level 6. Shadowheart is still a cleric, but I've respected her as a life cleric. There's a good reason for that, and I firmly like her in that role. So just talking generally about the party and how you should compose the party in order to make sure that at least one of your characters can survive, can get away, and potentially reignite your party so that you haven't lost the encounter, you haven't wiped, and you have to kind of start again from scratch. What I like to have on most characters, you'll see, is some way to become invisible, okay? Some way to either haste or defend, some way to move across the battlefield quickly. And you can see here Will's got Misty Step, he's got haste, and he's got Shrouded in Shadow. They come from either equipment or party skills or spells, or mostly that kind of source. And for example, Will, he's getting Shrouded in Shadow from Shadow of Menzoberranzan. He could use invisibility, but I've gone with other spells to give me that, give me other capabilities. So that Shrouded in Shadow is the invisibility role there. If I go to Layla of the Glade, who's, as I say, a level 6 bard, she's got haste, she's got invisibility. she's got Misty Step. And again, that might be coming from spells or equipment, and it means that she can get across the battlefield. She can potentially get out of harm's way when she's meleeed by a monster of some kind. She can also haste herself for, trying to get away or becoming harder, in combat, much more capable in combat. And invisibility when the chips are down and you just need to get out of harm's way. In fact, earlier on in this combat, Will had to resort to the invisibility to get out of the way of that flesh golem because he was being beaten senseless by it. Okay, we look at Shadowheart, for example. You'd think, okay, she's a life cleric. Her role is to heal and all that kind of stuff. Well, surprise, surprise, she's got Misty Step. She's got invisibility. Okay, I don't think she has haste, but she's got 2 of the 3 components that I find very important. She also happens to have something called spiritual weapon, and for me that is another vital aspect of building your party for resilience. The ability to create minions of some description, be they spiritual weapons, or be they undead that you animated, or be they an imp that you conjure from nothing, or a beast, companion if you're a ranger, for example. These are important elements that give your party the ability to outnumber your opponents, and also you will find that very often you can drag enemies away from your key characters with those minions. Okay, so spiritual weapon, for example, can do a little bit of damage, but it's also occupying the enemy ghouls in this fight and taking them away from beating up on Karlach. Okay, so it really, really helped. Superb. In fact, the one spiritual weapon was able to actually occupy the 2 ghouls on one side of the map for many turns, which meant that Karlach could engage with the flesh golem one-on-one, and that was vital. Okay. Now, when we look at Karlach, let's look at Karlach here, and okay, so you say, all right, well, where's her Misty Step? Where is her invisibility? Where is her haste? And the answer is she doesn't need it, because she's the one character that I expect will hold down a particular front of the battle. Okay, so she's occupied the flesh golem, all right, along with the spiritual weapon and along with Shadowheart. The flesh golem and the 2 ghouls in that part of the map. Let me just show you. That's where they are. You can see them here. I've got my spiritual weapon. There it is. And Karlach is being literally kept alive a lot of the time by Shadowheart. Okay, and sometimes with some of the ghoul abilities, Shadowheart's been a real benefit because she's able to kind of alleviate some of the special attacks that the ghouls have. I won't tell you what, just to be a surprise, but just keep that in mind. You might need to not just heal, but deal with other conditions as well. And what that has done is that effectively I've got 3 party members with the spiritual weapon dealing with the 3 threats and holding them, from moving out into the greater battlefield here. I was then able to, with 2 of my party members, Will and Layla, hunt down the most important, enemy in the fight, and chase him across the battleground, and eventually, not him, there we go, Balthazar. Get rid of Balthazar. Okay, so it was a 2-on-1. I was basically able to make the fight a 2-on-1. Now, there's a very good reason when you actually encounter this, and if it turns into a fight for you, you may remember my words that said, okay, if you can isolate Balthazar, you're halfway to winning the fight. And what's more, like I say, even though it looks like I'm in a lot of trouble here, the reality is I've already won the fight because I'm taking care of the most important enemy in the battle. Okay, I won't tell you why or anything like that. So you need characters who can move across the battlefield as quickly as possible, can potentially turn invisible in order to escape, more than anything else, like getting, stealth sneak attacks and things like that. It's not what I use it for. Invisibility is my panic button. All hope is lost. Hopefully I'm not up against sea invisibility type enemies, but on the whole, invisibility will help you through many, if not most, combats that you face. The other thing is haste. And that can make the absolute difference. If I can haste Karlak, for example, then suddenly she's getting multiple attacks beyond what she already gets, which is a couple of weapon attacks and also a bonus weapon attack as well. So she'd normally be able to attack 3 times in a turn with Frenzy in place, but with haste she can effectively at least go to say 4 or 5 attacks per turn, and that makes all the difference because she's hitting hard, and she's been able to reduce the flesh golem down. Even though she's come close to death many times, Shadowheart has kept her going, and the spiritual weapon has also weighed in with some damage, and has also managed to bring down the ghouls here to some respectable level. Shadowheart, on the whole, as a life cleric, is there to keep everyone alive, and that also means that she needs to be able to move across the battlefield quickly. But she, as a life cleric, has AoE healing. She's got Turn Undead, very useful as well. She's also got Lesser Restoration that can remove some crucial conditions that are in place. She can even weigh in with some damage now and then with Guiding Bolt, against alive enemies, not undead enemies, and inflict wounds is awesome. And so she can still be a sort of defender, but also a healer, and also, deal damage as necessary. So I don't want to go too long on this, but I want you to consider this possibility. When you build your, so this is the crux of what I'm trying to say here. Expect that very complex fights, especially where there are many combatants, and especially in Tactician mode, you should expect that your party is going to be broken into 2 fronts. Okay? You might have 2 of your party members taking on a whole bunch of enemies, and 2 of your other party members taking on a whole bunch of enemies. You need extra minions or extra bodies that can occupy enemies and equalize the numbers. You need to be able to escape as you need to. You need to be able to call upon other resources like healing potions and revivify scrolls, because if you've got healing potions on all of your characters, and even if you don't, you can move them. If we go to the inventory, even though characters are across the the battlefield, you can move potions around as necessary. It's not a problem. Okay, you don't have to exchange them in some weird way. You could just drag them across most of the time, unless they're not in the same room at all. I think there is a distance factor. But quite apart from that, if you can throw healing potions on enemies, on your companions, then they're going to survive because you're effectively turning into a pseudo healer. So you have a primary healer, and then everyone else is a secondary healer. You need a primary tank, in effect. You need a not necessarily a character that's going to draw aggro like in MMOs, etc., but a character that's going to hold down a front, maybe block a door, like Karlak is doing to some extent here. And you also need panic button skills like invisibility and like Misty Step. If you can bring out, put that across your characters and have at least 3 of the 4 characters with most of those skills, there isn't many combat situations that you're going to lose, except where a whole party wipe happens in a single turn. If you've got staggered party deaths, you can always rebootstrap your party by throwing potions to, if they haven't thrown to death condition and they aren't actually dead, then you can get them up with basic healing. Healing Word is another absolutely essential spell. Everyone who can have it should have it, or some form of it, because you can then at range also bring characters out of their knockdown condition. And then the other thing is as well, if characters are actually dead, I see that as a benefit. As long as you've got Revivify spell, which Shadowheart has. She's got the Revivify somewhere here. Where is it again? There it is, yeah. So she can Revivify from a spell, but get the scrolls whenever you can. Make sure you've got the Revivify scrolls. I actually am not sad when one of my characters dies. As long as I've got a Revivify scroll on someone, I can drag it across to a surviving character, and they can then click on my dead character and actually move them all, halfway across the battlefield very often, with the Revivify condition that when you click on a character to effectively resurrect them, you can then choose where they end up within, say, 9 to 18 meters. So you can literally bootstrap your party again and get going. And here's the final point I want to make after all that. If you've got Misty Step and Invisibility on 3 out of your 4 characters, or at least 2 out of your 4 characters, you have the ability with one of your characters, even if the other 3 are dead and you have no revivify capability, as long as your surviving character has Invisibility and Misty Step, you can Misty Step away from combat. You can, cast Invisibility in the same turn, because one is an action and one is a bonus action, and you will then be effectively out of combat unless enemies can see Invisibility. Most of the time they can't, which means that the combat ends. You can then go and reignite your characters by, pressing M, going to your camp, buying some Revivify scrolls, menu back, so teleport back, and then go and resurrect your characters. You've then got the condition that you don't have to do the whole fight again. You only have to fight the remaining characters. Like, if I lose at this point, I don't have to fight Balthazar again, because as long as one of my characters survives and combat ends. Okay, so just some considerations for you. Even on Tactician Mode, there's lots of ways that you can build your party to make sure that you don't lose combats and have to start again. But you might be down and out, but there's always the second half, and the second half you come back stronger, you get your party members back in play, you have a short rest, maybe you share some potions around, you might not have all your abilities, and then you come back and you get going again with the remaining enemies that are still left. And so you can sometimes even build for that eventuality. I thought I'd give you some ideas, and just to round things out, just say, look, one of your characters has got to be able to hold down a whole room of enemies, potentially. Karlach is great for that. Barbarians, when they're raging, they're taking less damage. It's harder for them to be, have conditions that affect them. And, they are a great damage dealer in and of themselves. I've got other damage dealers as well, but each of my characters holds down multiple roles. Yes, I have a primary healer. Yes, I have a primary combatant, but the other characters can take those roles as well. For example, Shadowheart, with the Cyanide mace, she can actually turn into pretty good damage dealer, over a couple of turns duration. She can also, with dual crossbows, even though she's not proficient in them, doesn't mean she can't use them. She can attack at range, even if she's used all her spell slots. So it can be, and she's still got her cantrips potentially. So it can be really, really useful to have characters that occupy multiple roles, and as the combat shifts and moves, you've got those multiple roles in place. I think it's highly important to identify one character who can get away from combat and potentially revive everyone. In my sense, it's either going to be, in my party, it's almost always going to be Shadowheart. I'm going to take her out of battle. I'm going to leave Misty Step and Invisibility only for the times when, as a panic button. I'm going to take her out of combat. I'm going to go away, get back, to a point where I can resurrect my other 3 party members and re-establish some form of new front to take on, a new way of taking on the remaining enemies. So you can almost whittle down the enemies to maybe, a lot weaker set of them, and then do the combat again. There are obviously some combat encounters where that wouldn't be possible, and you have to restart, but those are fewer than more. There's definitely more of the regular combat encounters where you could come back after combat has ceased. It's not like it resets completely. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. Thanks as always for watching. Drop some comments in. What are your tips for surviving combat? What are your tips for creating party composition to identify certain roles and making sure everyone has panic buttons and things like that? Enjoy, and we'll see you next time.